Hello Thrivers, today I'm talking about external validation. And I want to talk about this because I know so many people in my face-to-face coaching that they know they have this problem, they know they have this challenge, but no matter how much they know on a logical level, they can't seem to change the behavior. Okay, the first reason why external validation is challenging to break out of is because as children, we learn how to validate ourselves by the way our parents validate us. When parents mirror their children, when parents provide validation and help their child to build that muscle or that skill as well by saying things like, you should be proud of yourself, or just honoring that child's perspective, that helps the child to recognize, oh, I have a perspective and I'm allowed to have it and it's okay. But if you were raised with narcissistic parents, they don't mirror their children. You're expected to mirror them. So you never get the validation from your parent that you need. But on top of it, when you start to grow and you start to kind of try to give yourself validation, for example, this might look like maybe somebody comes home from school and they have an A+, and they're like, wow, I'm so proud of myself, look what I got, look at the grade that I got. And the narcissistic parent comes back and says something like, yeah, you got that grade, but you're this, or you're lazy, or if they only knew, or some kind of negative connotation. So now that child not only never received validation from their parent, but their own validation is twisted and turned into something bad. What happens is you grow, right? You grow physically, but it's almost like you're emotionally stunted, where a child needed to learn how to validate self that they never did. And now, as an adult, you're still living in that thought pattern that you need it from somebody else. And that's because the reality is as a child, you did. You needed it from somebody outside of self, but you never got it. So your brain hasn't learned how to be able to give that to yourself. So a part of healing and working through needing external validation, or not needing it anymore, I should say, is rewiring your brain to teach it how to validate self. So you have to teach it what it didn't learn in childhood, what it should have learned but didn't. So that's one reason why it's hard. It's because the logic alone doesn't create the rewiring. It's what you do with the logic that creates the rewiring. The second reason it's so hard to break out of that obsession that you need it, because it almost feels like a drug, right, is because of how trauma responds. Okay, so in childhood, if your perspectives were denied, if you were not validated, if you were not mirrored, if you were rejected and emotionally abandoned for being unique and authentic, right? Being you instead of what the parent wanted. Being treated that way was traumatic. It was traumatic for a child. It's to be rejected by the people that are taking care of you and that your life depends on is traumatic. Okay? So what happens is when trauma's in the body and it's overwhelming, your brain is a survival mechanism. And it will do everything and anything to try to keep you safe from pain, whether it's physical or emotional. And the pain of the trauma that's taking place because of the dynamics in your family, what happens is your brain kind of freezes that trauma and it compartmentalizes it in your brain somewhere, right? Kind of out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing. But then, in order to keep you from feeling the pain of that emotional abandonment, the rejection, the conditional love, in order to keep you from feeling it, your brain develops what some people call the protective self, right? That's what Jackson McKenzie calls it in the book Whole Again. Some people call it a false self. Some people call it pseudo self. But in regards to the protective self, the point of the protective self is to keep you from feeling that those numbed, now repressed emotions. And the way that it keeps you from feeling them is by putting your focus externally. So if your numbed emotion and suppressed emotion is feeling shame because you're not enough, right? Anyone that's been treated with conditional love doesn't feel enough. You had to be something else in order to get love. So that feeling, in order to not feel that feeling, what your brain does is it tries to prove to you that you are enough by getting other people to validate it. It keeps you stuck in people pleasing. Now, the problem with handling it, the trauma that way, is that you never resolve the original wound. You're stuck in symptom management. And trauma's okay with that. Because if you're stuck in symptom management, you're still looking externally. You're dealing with the people pleasing, you're dealing with the anxiety, you're dealing with the depression, and you're not feeling the core wounds. And it thinks it's helping you. I'm going to give you an illustration that just shows how much of a waste of time and energy and life that it is to be stuck in external validation. Okay, so think of an actor or an actress, and they're playing a part in a movie, and anything they don't want to do, they have their double, right? They have their double to handle anything they don't want to do. And that works for them, and that's all fine. But in your life, if you're battling complex PTSD, if you are struggling with external validation, your protective self is like your double, okay? It's your double in life, and every time you don't feel enough, because every now and then that emotion comes up. We may not recognize it. We may feel it more of a body sensation, and we may not even know what it is, but it starts to come up. The brain's coping skill gets you focused on the external. But that's as helpful as, let's say, an actor or an actress is thirsty. They're on their set and they're like, oh gosh, I'm so thirsty. So their double takes a drink. Is their thirst going to be quenched? No. That's what happens with your protective self when it stays stuck in these programs of being stuck in the external. You're thirsty for unconditional love. You're thirsty for feeling enough, worthy, good. And your double is trying to quench that with other people giving it to your protective self. So it never reaches your authentic self. So I'm hoping that now you're at the point where you're like, yes, I want to get rid of this. I am done. I am tired of living this way. Because the truth is it's not really living when you're living out of or life through your protective self. I'm just going to give you one tip here. One thing that you could take away that you could actually start putting into practice if you want to break out of your protective self. And that's to start tracking how often it shows up in your life. In other words, just track it. Don't judge it. Don't try to change it. Just notice it and track it. I've had clients overcome huge phobias, huge habits that felt impossible to overcome. And one of the first things that helped them was starting to track the behavior. And the reason that's so helpful is because when we start tracking when we're living as our authentic self and when we're slipping into our protective self, then we're bringing those behaviors into our conscious awareness. And it's only if they're in our conscious awareness that we can start to change them. What often happens when somebody is tracking is that in the beginning, they'll start to see a really high number of how many times they're not being authentic, how many times they're slipping into people pleasing or being overly focused on what the other person wants or needs or what the other person is feeling. And within about 7 to 14 days, the number starts to diminish because just by having it in your conscious awareness alone starts giving your mind a choice. Now, I'm not saying this is the only thing that you need to do, but I am saying it's a good place to start. So try that and let me know how it goes in the comment section below. And always remember that if you need more help, if the videos aren't enough and you're hopping from video to video and year after year, you don't feel like you're shifting or changing or embracing the life that you really want, make sure you check out my website. I'll leave my link here. Check out the resources that are available, because sometimes it's just that we need a little bit more. We need more one-on-one or more personal, structured assistance in order to work through these challenges. And they are available. If not from me, find it from someone where it resonates with you so that you can break out of these side effects of complex PTSD.